Imagine sitting in a meeting where your boss is explaining a plan that makes absolutely no sense, yet everyone else is nodding like it is genius. If this situation makes your blood boil, you are likely wired with a psychological rejection of incompetent authority that you cannot simply turn off. It is not just about being grumpy or hating your office culture. There is a deep evolutionary reason why your brain rejects bad leadership. In this video, we will explore why the social dynamic of a bad boss triggers a biological red alert in some people, while others seem completely immune. We will look at why certain personality types feel a moral obligation to speak up, even when staying silent would be the safer career move. By the end, you will understand if you are actually a troublemaker or if you simply possess a high demand for competence-based respect. Most people assume that a title like manager or director automatically earns a person the right to be followed and obeyed. But for a massive chunk of the population, a title is just a piece of paper that means nothing if the person holding it is clueless. Psychologists often point to the Peter Principle, a concept introduced by Lawrence J. Peter to explain why offices feel so chaotic. The idea is that in any hierarchy, people tend to rise to their specific level of incompetence through successive promotions. A great salesman gets promoted until he becomes a terrible manager, and then he stays there because he is no longer good enough to move up again. When you work under someone like this, it creates massive mental stress because your brain is trying to solve a problem that your leader is making worse. This is where the social dynamic gets messy because humans are evolutionarily wired to follow the most capable person in the room for survival. Think back thousands of years to when we lived in small tribes where every decision carried the weight of life or death. If the person leading the hunt did not know how to track an animal, the whole tribe would eventually starve to death. In those days, following an incompetent leader was a literal death sentence. So our brains developed a biological red alert system. Even though we are now in air-conditioned offices and not in the dangerous woods, that ancient alarm still screams when we see a leader making a dumb choice. Some people can quiet that alarm because they value social harmony, or they simply want to keep their paycheck safe at all costs. But for people with high levels of openness to experience and low agreeableness, that alarm is way too loud to ever ignore. Having low agreeableness does not mean you are a jerk. It means you value truth and objective results more than you value people's fleeting feelings. When an incompetent leader gives you a task that is clearly a waste of time, your brain processes it as a direct logical insult. You might find yourself asking questions like, "Why are we doing this?" Or, "Can you explain how this helps the final goal?" To an incompetent boss, these questions feel like a personal attack on their power, but to you, they are just a way to ensure the work is good. This creates a toxic loop where the boss views you as difficult, and you view the boss as a permanent roadblock to progress. A famous study by social psychologists John French and Bertram Raven in 1959 identified the different sources of power in a group. There is legitimate power, which is just the title printed on a business card, and then there is expert power, which is the knowledge you actually possess. People who struggle with incompetent authority usually only care about expert power and disregard titles entirely. If you do not know more than me about the task at hand, your brain asks, "Why are you the one telling me how to do it?" This dynamic becomes even more painful when you see the sycophants in the office who realize the boss is clueless but kiss up to them anyway. Watching this happen can feel like you are living in a fake reality where the truth no longer matters and lies are rewarded. It leads to a feeling called moral injury, which is the psychological pain we feel when forced to act against our own core values. If you value excellence and you are forced to do mediocre work by a bad leader, it causes tangible damage to your long-term mental health. This is why so many people are joining the quiet quitting movement. They have realized their leaders do not actually care about quality. They stop putting in the extra effort because their brain refuses to reward a system that prioritizes ego over actual competence. But let's look at a concrete example of this from history to see how high the stakes can really be when authority fails. Think about the Chernobyl disaster in 1986, where the hierarchy of power directly led to a global catastrophe. The leaders at the plant were more worried about looking good for their political bosses than they were about the actual physics of the nuclear reactor. The engineers who tried to speak up and point out the dangers were ignored or threatened because they were challenging the authority of the managers. The authority was incompetent, the managers were blinded by ego, and the result was one of the biggest disasters in human history. While your office job might not blow up a city, the feeling of watching a train wreck happen in slow motion feels exactly the same. It is also important to talk about the Dunning-Kruger effect, a cognitive bias where people with low ability overestimate their own talent. Incompetent leaders often truly believe they are doing a great job because they lack the very skills needed to realize what they are doing wrong. This makes it almost impossible to argue with them using logic because they are psychologically blind to their own glaring mistakes. So, what happens to the person who cannot just shut up and work in a broken system? Usually, they become the whistleblower or the person who gets labeled as not a team player by the HR department. But in reality, these are often the most valuable employees because they are the only ones actually telling the truth. Modern companies are starting to realize this, which is why some tech giants are moving away from traditional boss-heavy structures. Companies like Valve or early-stage startups often use flat hierarchies, where respect is earned through hard work, not empty titles. If you find yourself constantly frustrated by leaders who do not know their stuff, you might just be in the wrong professional environment. You are likely someone who needs a meritocracy, which is a system where the smartest and most capable people are the ones who actually lead. It is also worth noting that Gen Z and Millennials are showing much lower tolerance for this kind of authority than previous generations ever did. Older generations were taught to respect the position itself, but younger workers were raised to respect authenticity and results. This shift is causing a massive collision in the workplace right now between traditional management and a new results-driven workforce. Managers are wondering why their staff won't just do what they are told, while staff are wondering why they should listen to someone who can't open a PDF. If you are dealing with this right now, remember that your frustration is actually a sign of your own high personal standards. You aren't a bad employee for wanting your leader to be good at their job. You are a person who values the integrity of the work. The stress you feel is a biological response to a system that is fundamentally broken and ignoring reality. Sometimes the best thing you can do is find a leader you actually admire and learn everything you can from their expertise. Because when you finally find someone with true expert power, that red alert in your brain finally turns off and you can focus. You will find that you are actually a very loyal and hardworking person when the person in charge actually knows what they're doing. Your refusal to respect incompetence isn't a flaw. It's a compass pointing you toward a place where your skills will finally be valued.